Miguel's Tacos was just another food truck parked outside the Denver VA hospital, serving lunch to doctors and patients. But every Tuesday at midnight, something different happened. Miguel Rodriguez would drive to the homeless encampment under the I-25 overpass and quietly hand out free meals to veterans living in tents and cardboard shelters. No fanfare, no social media posts, no asking for thanks. What the recipients didn't know was that Miguel understood their struggle better than anyone, because 3 years ago he'd been living under that same bridge, a Purple Heart recipient with PTSD, struggling to find his way home from Afghanistan. Welcome to the Human Stories. Before we continue this powerful story of brotherhood, service, and second chances, tell me in the comments from which city in the world are you watching this video today. And if you believe stories like this need to be shared, hit that subscribe button and help us honor those who never stopped serving their fellow veterans. The lunch rush at the Denver VA Medical Center was always crazy. Miguel Rodriguez had been parking his bright red food truck in the same spot for 2 years now, serving up authentic street tacos to hospital staff, patients, and visitors. The smell of grilled carnitas and fresh cilantro drew long lines of hungry customers who'd grown to expect quality food and friendly service. Miguel worked alone, moving efficiently in the cramped truck kitchen. At 42, he still carried himself like a soldier, back straight, movements precise, always aware of his surroundings. His black hair was starting to show gray at the temples, and his brown hands bore small scars from years of cooking and other things he didn't talk about. "Two carnitas, extra salsa," called out Dr. Sarah Chen, a regular customer who worked in the hospital's PTSD clinic. "How's business, Miguel?" "Can't complain, Doc. Keep him busy." Miguel's English carried just a hint of his East LA accent, softened by years in the Army and life on the road. He handed her the steaming tacos wrapped in foil. "You take care of yourself in there." Dr. Chen noticed what others might miss, the way Miguel's eyes automatically scanned the parking lot, how he always positioned himself where he could see all approaches to the truck. Old habits from another life. What she didn't know was that for Miguel, this wasn't just about slinging tacos. Every dollar he made during the day went towards something else entirely, something that happened when most of Denver was asleep. By 3 p.m., the lunch crowd had thinned out. Miguel cleaned his grill, restocked supplies, and counted the day's take. $240. Not bad for a Tuesday. More importantly, it was enough to fund tonight's real mission. As the sun set behind the Rocky Mountains, Miguel drove his truck home to a small apartment in Aurora. The place was Spartan, military neat, with just the basics. On his kitchen table sat a stack of to-go containers he'd prepared that morning, filled with rice, beans, and seasoned beef. Next to them, a handwritten list of names. These weren't customers. These were brothers. At 11:45 p.m., Miguel loaded the containers into his truck and headed toward downtown Denver. The city looked different at midnight, emptier, harder, full of shadows where people who'd been forgotten by society tried to survive another night. The homeless encampment under the I-25 overpass wasn't officially supposed to exist. The city tried to clear it out every few months, but people always came back. It was the only place where veterans could sleep without being hassled by cops or kicked out of parks after sunset. Miguel parked his truck at the edge of the encampment and turned off the engine. He'd been coming here every Tuesday for 8 months now, always quietly, always without announcement. No cameras, no volunteers, no charity organization logos. Just one vet looking out for others. "Miguel's here," someone called softly from the shadows. Slowly, figures emerged from tents and makeshift shelters. About a dozen men and 2 women, ages ranging from Vietnam vets in their 70s to Iraq and Afghanistan veterans barely out of their 20s. "Evening, hermanos," Miguel said, opening the back of his truck. "Brought dinner." Tommy Reeves was the first in line, a former Marine from Alabama who'd been living rough for 6 months since losing his job. "Man, you don't know how much this means," he said as Miguel handed him a warm container. "Yeah, I do. Miguel replied quietly. Next came Linda Martinez, an Army nurse who'd served 3 tours in Iraq before PTSD and medical bills had cost her everything. She never said much, just nodded gratefully when Miguel handed her food and sometimes asked if she needed anything else. One by one they came forward. Each had a story, each had served, and each had somehow fallen through the cracks that were supposed to catch veterans when they came home. Miguel knew their stories because he'd lived one just like them. "How's the truck business going?" asked Jerry Washington, a former staff sergeant who'd lost both legs to an IED in Kandahar. Jerry was one of the few who knew Miguel's story. "Good days and bad days, but we're making it work." Miguel handed him an extra container. "This one's for Marcus, if he comes around later." Marcus Williams was the newest addition to the camp, a former Army medic who'd been struggling with addiction and homelessness since getting out. He was skittish, didn't trust easily, and usually showed up after the others had gotten their food. As Miguel finished handing out meals, a police cruiser pulled up. Officer Janet Rodriguez, no relation despite the name, got out and walked over. Miguel tensed slightly, but Officer Rodriguez held up her hand. "Just checking on everyone. Cold night." She looked at Miguel. "You're the taco truck guy, right?" "Yes, ma'am." "My partner got lunch from you last week. Said the food was great." She paused, looking around at the veterans quietly eating. "What you're doing here? It's good work." Miguel nodded but didn't say anything. He wasn't looking for recognition or approval. He was just paying a debt that couldn't be measured in money. 3 years earlier, Miguel Rodriguez had been living in this same encampment, sleeping in a borrowed tent and drinking cheap vodka to quiet the nightmares that followed him home from Helmand Province. He'd enlisted right out of high school in East LA, driven by a combination of patriotism, family tradition, and the need to escape a neighborhood where too many kids ended up dead or in prison. The Army had given him purpose, structure, and brothers he'd trusted with his life. Miguel had served as a combat medic with the 10th Mountain Division, 3 tours in Afghanistan between 2016 and 2020. He'd saved lives, lost friends, and carried memories that civilian life didn't seem to have room for. The Purple Heart had come from shrapnel in his back during a Taliban ambush outside Kandahar. The PTSD had come from watching too many good soldiers come home in boxes. After his medical discharge, Miguel had tried to adjust. Used his GI Bill to study business at Metro State, got a job at a Denver restaurant, even started dating a nurse he'd met at the VA. But the nightmares got worse, the anxiety became crippling, and eventually the drinking was the only thing that helped. The downward spiral was fast and brutal. Lost the job, lost the apartment, lost the girlfriend. The VA tried to help, but the waiting lists were long and the system was overwhelmed. Miguel found himself on the streets, another statistic in a crisis that nobody wanted to talk about. Living under the bridge had been rock bottom, but it had also been where he'd met Jerry Washington. Jerry was already an elder statesman of the camp, a double amputee who somehow maintained his dignity and looked out for the younger vets who showed up broken and lost. "The thing about being down here," Jerry had told him one night, "is you got 2 choices. You can let it kill you, or you can figure out how to climb back up. But you can't do it alone." Jerry had connected Miguel with a VA counselor who actually cared, helped him navigate the benefit system, and most importantly, convinced him that being homeless didn't mean being worthless. It took 8 months, but Miguel eventually got clean, got housing, and started planning his next chapter. The food truck had been Jerry's idea. "You can cook, you've got the discipline to run a business, and you know how to work with people," Jerry had said. "Plus, food trucks are big now. Hipsters love that stuff." Miguel had used his VA disability benefits as startup capital, bought a used truck, and spent every waking hour learning the business. It wasn't easy, the health permits, the competition, the 12-hour days, but it was honest work that felt like serving people again. The decision to feed the homeless veterans had been automatic. How could he enjoy success while his brothers were still struggling in the same place he'd been? Every Tuesday had become sacred, a reminder of where he'd come from and why he couldn't forget. It was a cold February night when Miguel got the call that would change everything. Dr. Sarah Chen from the VA hospital was on the line, her voice tight with stress. "Miguel, I need your help. We've got a situation with one of your Tuesday night regulars." Marcus Williams had barricaded himself in a motel room on East Colfax, threatening suicide. The police had been there for 3 hours, but Marcus wouldn't talk to negotiators, wouldn't let anyone in, and had told the SWAT team that if they tried to break down the door, he'd finish what the Taliban started. "The crisis team is stumped," Dr. Chen explained, "but one of the other vets mentioned that Marcus trusts you, said you've been feeding him, talking to him. Would you be willing to try?" Miguel didn't hesitate. "I'm on my way." The Moonlight Motel on East Colfax was a dump, the kind of place where people paid by the week and asked no questions. Police cars surrounded the building, their red and blue lights painting everything in harsh colors. SWAT officers crouched behind vehicles, waiting for orders. Commander Lisa Torres approached Miguel as he parked his truck. "You're the food truck guy. Look, we appreciate you coming out, but this is a train negotiation situation. With respect, Commander, your train negotiators have been here 3 hours and gotten nowhere. Marcus is a combat medic who did 4 tours in Afghanistan. He's not going to trust someone who's never been where he's been." Dr. Chen appeared at Miguel's shoulder. "Commander, at this point, what do we have to lose?" Torres handed Miguel a radio. "Keep us informed, and if this goes bad, it won't," Miguel said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. Room 237 was on the 2nd floor, at the end of a balcony that smelled like cigarettes and despair. Miguel climbed the stairs slowly, his hands visible, making no sudden movements. "Marcus," he called through the door. "It's Miguel. From the truck." Silence. "I brought some food, hermano. Thought you might be hungry." More silence then. "Go away, Miguel. I don't want you to see this." "See what? A brother who's having a bad night?" "Marcus, I've had plenty of those." Miguel sat down in the hallway, his back against the door. "You know what Jerry Washington told me when I was living under the bridge? He said that being broken doesn't make you weak, it makes you human." Through the door, he could hear Marcus crying. "I can't do this anymore, Miguel. The dreams, the guilt. I lost 3 guys in my unit because I couldn't save them. What's the point of coming home if they didn't?" Miguel closed his eyes, remembering his own dark nights. "Marcus, can I tell you something about why I really started the food truck?" "I didn't start the truck to make money," Miguel continued, still sitting in the hallway. "I started it because I needed a reason to get up every morning that wasn't just about me." Inside the room, Marcus had gone quiet, but Miguel could sense he was listening. 3 years ago, I was exactly where you are. Different room, same thoughts. Jerry Washington sat outside my door for 6 hours just talking, just being there. Know what finally got me to open up? "What?" Marcus's voice was barely audible through the door. "He told me that the guys we lost don't need us to die for them. They need us to live for them, to be the kind of men they'd be proud to have served with." Miguel heard movement inside the room, footsteps, the sound of something being set down. "The names you carry, Marcus, your guys who didn't make it home, they're not burdens, they're reasons, reasons to help other people, reasons to be better than you think you deserve to be." The lock clicked. Slowly, the door opened. Marcus Williams stood there, still holding the service pistol, but it was pointed at the floor. His face was streaked with tears, his eyes red with exhaustion and pain. "I don't know how to live with this, Miguel." "Neither did I. But I learned something. You don't have to live with it alone." Miguel stood up slowly, his hands still visible. "You remember PFC Johnson, the kid from Oklahoma who was always talking about his girlfriend?" Marcus nodded. "He used to say that the best way to honor the dead was to help the living. That's what the Tuesday night thing is about, hermano. It's about Johnson and Rodriguez and all the others who can't help anymore." Marcus's hand was shaking. Miguel took a step closer. "What do you think Johnson would want you to do right now?" Marcus looked at the gun, then at Miguel. "He'd want me to get help." "Then let's get you help." Marcus set the pistol on the dresser and collapsed into Miguel's arms, sobbing like a man who'd been holding his breath for years. Miguel held him, not saying anything, just being present for a brother who'd forgotten he wasn't alone. Commander Torres and the crisis team found them there 20 minutes later, two Purple Heart recipients holding each other up in a dingy motel room, proving that sometimes the best negotiator is someone who's stood in the same dark place. 6 months later, Miguel's mission had become something bigger than anyone expected. What started as one food truck feeding homeless veterans on Tuesday nights had grown into a network of volunteers, donations, and community support that Miguel never saw coming. It began when Dr. Sarah Chen wrote an article for the Denver Post about Miguel's work. She hadn't asked permission, just told the story of a veteran who'd turned his food truck into a lifeline for homeless brothers and sisters. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Restaurants started donating surplus food. The Denver Broncos organization sent a check. Local veterans groups volunteered to help with distribution. Miguel's small apartment became a coordination center for an operation that was feeding over 100 homeless veterans every week. "I never wanted this to get big," Miguel told Jerry Washington as they organized donations in a warehouse space that a local business owner had donated. "This was supposed to be just us, just quiet." "Brother, some things are too important to stay quiet," Jerry replied, wheeling his chair between stacks of canned goods. "Besides, you taught me something." "What's that?" "That healing other people is how you heal yourself." Miguel had to admit Jerry was right. The nightmares hadn't completely stopped, but they came less frequently. The anxiety was manageable, and for the first time since coming home from Afghanistan, Miguel felt like his life had meaning beyond just survival. Marcus Williams had become Miguel's unofficial second-in-command, helping coordinate the volunteer schedule and working with the VA to connect homeless veterans with services. The crisis intervention had worked. Marcus was in therapy, living in transitional housing, and finding purpose in helping others who were struggling. "The thing about rock bottom," Marcus told a group of new volunteers, "is that it gives you a solid foundation to build on. Miguel taught me that." The food truck was still Miguel's main business, but now it served a dual purpose. During the day, it fed hospital workers and regular customers. At night, it became a mobile command center for an operation that was changing lives across Denver. Miguel had also started speaking at high schools and colleges, telling his story and encouraging young people to think about service, military or civilian. He wasn't comfortable with the attention, but he understood that his platform could reach people who needed to hear that recovery was possible. "Miguel's not just feeding people," Dr. Chen told a reporter. "He's proving that veterans can come home and thrive, not just survive." The letter from the White House arrived on a Tuesday, which seemed fitting. Miguel was prepping for the evening food distribution when Jerry wheeled up with an official-looking envelope. "This came to the warehouse," Jerry said, grinning. "Might want to sit down." Miguel opened the letter with hands that shook slightly. It was an invitation to receive the President's Volunteer Service Award at a ceremony in Washington, D.C. The citation mentioned his work with homeless veterans and called him an exemplary example of American service continuing beyond the uniform. "Holy shit," Miguel whispered. "Language," Jerry laughed. "But yeah, holy shit." Miguel stared at the invitation, overwhelmed. 3 years ago, he'd been homeless and suicidal. Now the president wanted to honor him for helping other veterans. It didn't seem real. "You're going, right?" Marcus asked when he heard the news. "I don't know, man. This whole thing has gotten way bigger than I ever wanted." "Miguel," Marcus said seriously, "you saved my life. You've saved dozens of lives. If the president wants to honor that, you owe it to every veteran you've helped to accept." The ceremony was held in the Rose Garden on a crisp October morning. Miguel wore his dress blues, the first time he'd put on a military uniform since his discharge. Standing next to him were other volunteers from across the country, each being honored for community service. When the president hung the medal around Miguel's neck, the commander-in-chief leaned in and said quietly, "Sergeant Rodriguez, Your country is proud of you, but more importantly, your brothers are proud of you. Miguel felt tears he didn't expect, not for the honor, but for all the veterans who couldn't be there, the ones still living on the streets, the ones who hadn't made it home, the ones who were still fighting battles that nobody could see. In his acceptance speech, Miguel kept it simple. This isn't about me. This is about remembering that when we serve our country, we don't stop serving when we take off the uniform. We just find new ways to serve our brothers and sisters. The applause was polite, but Miguel knew the real measure of success wasn't in White House ceremonies. It was in the text message he received that evening from Marcus. Helped get 3 more vets into housing today. The mission continues. 2 years later, Miguel Rodriguez stood in front of a much bigger warehouse, watching volunteers load supplies into a fleet of food trucks. Miguel's mission now operated in 6 cities across Colorado and was expanding into New Mexico and Arizona. The original red truck was still part of the fleet, though Miguel didn't drive it every day anymore. Running a nonprofit required different skills than running a food truck, but the mission remained the same, making sure no veteran went hungry or forgotten. Jerry Washington had become the official operations coordinator, using his organizational skills to manage volunteers and coordinate with VA hospitals across the region. Marcus Williams was studying social work at the University of Denver, planning to become a counselor for veterans in crisis. "You know what the best part is?" Jerry asked Miguel as they watched a new volunteer, a recently discharged Marine named Sofia Gonzalez, learn how to load meals into insulated containers. "What's that?" "She's not here because she needs help. She's here because she wants to help. The cycle's changing." Miguel nodded, watching Sofia work with the same intensity she'd probably brought to her military service. The mission was evolving, growing beyond crisis intervention into something more sustainable: prevention. They were proving that veterans could come home and build something positive, that service didn't end with discharge, and that the brotherhood forged in military service could survive and thrive in civilian life. That evening, Miguel drove the original red truck to the I-25 overpass for the Tuesday night distribution. The encampment was smaller now. Many of the regulars had found housing or connected with services through Miguel's mission. But there were always new faces, new stories, new veterans who needed to know that someone cared. As he handed out meals, Miguel thought about the letter he'd written to his parents that morning, telling them about the expansion into Arizona. For the first time since coming home from Afghanistan, he was excited about the future instead of haunted by the past. "Miguel," called Tommy Reeves, the former Marine who'd been one of his first regular recipients and was now housed and working construction, "got someone new for you to meet." A young woman approached hesitantly, early 20s, wearing a backpack that looked like it contained everything she owned. Her eyes had the hollow look that Miguel recognized immediately. "This is Sarah," Tommy said. "Army medic, just got out, having a rough transition." Miguel handed Sarah a warm container and looked into her eyes. "Welcome home, hermana. We've got your back." And the cycle continued. This story reminds us that heroism doesn't always make headlines. Miguel Rodriguez spent years quietly feeding homeless veterans, asking for nothing in return, seeking no recognition. His heroism was in showing up, week after week, for brothers and sisters who had been forgotten by a society that didn't understand their struggles. The veteran homelessness crisis is real and ongoing. Thousands of men and women who served our country are living on the streets, struggling with PTSD, addiction, and the challenge of translating military skills into civilian success. But Miguel's story proves that recovery is possible, that service can continue beyond the uniform, and that sometimes the most powerful way to heal yourself is to help heal others. Miguel's mission started with one man, one food truck, and a handful of homeless veterans. It grew because communities rallied around the simple idea that no one who served their country should go hungry or forgotten. That's the power of grassroots action. One person deciding to do something, then others joining the mission. Have you ever met a veteran who struggled with the transition home? Do you know someone who turned their pain into purpose? Have you witnessed the power of peer support among people who've shared similar struggles? Share their stories in the comments. Tell us about the veterans in your community, the people who serve others without seeking recognition, the programs that are making a real difference in people's lives. Subscribe to the Human Stories, because every community has heroes like Miguel Rodriguez, people who faced their own darkness and chosen to be a light for others. Their stories remind us that service is a calling, not just a job, and that the bonds forged in military service can create positive change long after the uniform comes off. Remember, the best way to honor our veterans isn't just to say, "Thank you for your service." It's to ensure they have the support, resources, and community they need to thrive when they come home. Because a nation's character is measured not just by how it sends people to war, but by how it welcomes them back. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next story. Until then, if you know a veteran who's struggling, or if you want to support veteran causes in your community, remember that small actions can have big impacts. Sometimes all it takes is one person with a food truck and a heart full of brotherhood. The mission continues.